what is considered to be Jesus' first miracle. The truth is that this is the first recorded miracle. We have no clue as to how many miracles that Jesus may have performed before this. There is some literature that's non-biblical that actually states the fact that Jesus was a pretty fun kid to be around. As you can imagine, with the possibilities of maybe just picking up some mud and forming a little bird, blowing on it, and letting it fly away. And other literature that goes on and on and on about some of the things that Jesus could have done. Well, is that folklore? Is there any truth in it? Well, we don't know. It's not recorded for us. However, one of the things that we might be able to see and determine here in this text today, well, what's going on? It's a wedding, and it's at Cana. And even at weddings today, the weddings that I officiate, quite often we remind people that Jesus graced the wedding at Cana. Quite often we acknowledge that Jesus went to weddings. If you read the appetizer this week, you already know that weddings in Jesus' time literally lasted typically around 7 days. Now we can barely block out an hour or two to go to somebody's wedding. And people spend their whole almost entire life from the time that a child's born preparing for the wedding. And for those of you dads who have daughters, you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying when I say the wedding. I mean, you hear it over and over again, the wedding, the wedding, the wedding, to where it's just kind of resounding like the beat of a drum. And I was kind of amazed at that. But then when it came time to hear that in my own house, I realized then what it's really doing. It's numbing the dad to the point where he don't want to hear it anymore, and he just writes the check. We'll worry about it later. Weddings are huge events, even in our lives today. Those opportunities of bringing families together, lives together. Understand now, in Jesus' day, most often, well, we know that they were literally, the families chose. They decided who was marrying who. It wasn't exactly like it is now, that they were literally, chosen to, and they worked this out. And well, maybe they didn't know each other very well. So the wedding was a time when families and friends and different ones could come together and spend some time together. Well, 7 days is quite a long time to get to know each other. Well, and also, we look at, in our culture, the drinking of wine as being somewhat that of a social beverage that we could indulge and enjoy and so forth. But literally, in this point in time, in this area, in this culture, quite often in places there was not pure water. There was not enough pure water to go around. There were some places where the water was good, but other places, and then they had all these fruits, and the only way that they could keep them was to ferment them and so forth. So it was just a part of life as the drinking of wine. But notice in this story a couple of things that's going on. Back to the fact that Jesus' mother, Mary, knew that Jesus had the ability and some powers. As I had mentioned to you, the Bible doesn't tell us of any miracles prior to this one for Jesus. But it does here tell us that Mary knew that he had the ability, that he had the power. And then a dialogue slips in. I probably ought to save this for Mother's Day. I probably ought to save, this whole part here for Mother's Day. But in here, Mama tells the boy, "They out of wine." It was a major catastrophe. I mean, we don't know how long into the 7-day celebration they were. We don't know how far they are from finishing up. We're not sure if they just needed, a another gallon or two, or what was needed. But we do know that here in this dialogue, that Mary turns to Jesus and says, they're out of wine. And his reply back is, what is that to me? In other words, it's not my responsibility. I'm not hosting this thing, and and so forth. And then he adds to that, stating, my time has not yet come. Obviously, Mary and Jesus knew something, and Joseph too, knew something that's not all fleshed out in the writings. It's not all spoken for us. John, I guess, assumes that we already know. I guess when John was writing, he assumed that those who would be reading would already know something here. But it tells us at this point, Mary turned to the servants and said, do what he tells you. Now, how many of us have had mamas who've told us, do what Jesus tells you? Yeah, absolutely. Here we are in this situation, and Mary tells Jesus, they're out of wine. He said, hey, what is that to me? My time hasn't come yet. And then Mama turns to the servant and said, do what he tells you. So then Jesus has the bright idea and tells them to fill the water jars to the brim. It tells us there were 6 jars, possibly 20, maybe 30 gallons apiece, 120 to 180 gallons of water. But let me share with you what that water was. It wasn't drinking water. In our everyday modern language today, we would call it gray water. You with me? It was for the purpose of washing their hands. They would have gotten a little of it off and used it just for purification, washing their hands, probably even their feet. They probably washed the dust in their feet with this same water. Some of you starting to catch on the idea that this water here was for the ritual of purification. It was a part that had come through the Jewish sect of the Essenes, who believed in all of this washing of the hands, washing of the feet, purifying yourself and getting yourself ready and prepared. But now, all of a sudden, Jesus tells the servants, go over to the jars. Go over to the jars of the water of purification and fill them to the brim. And once you fill them to the brim, then pull from one of them a sample and take it to the head steward. Now, who all's involved in this? Well, the truth is Jesus is the one with the power, but it's Mary, it's mother of Jesus, Mary, now, who has not only told Jesus to get involved, but now she's also told the servants to get involved. You start to see this picture of why this would be a good Mother's Day sermon, right? But she tells them, and the servants knew. They knew what these jars of water were for. And they go over and they literally fill them to the brim, pull some off, take it to the head steward, who does not know where this wine came from. But as he tasted, he says to the groom, my, you've saved the best to last. Most typically, they serve the best wine first, and then once everyone is a little more happy and friendly and a little bit inebriated, then they bring out the lesser wine. Because at this point, they wouldn't care. Now that's the argument for somebody who wants to tell you that this wine wasn't fermented, that it wasn't alcohol. Right there's the argument for you. If somebody wants to share with you that disbelief. But nevertheless, saves the day. The miracle is performed, the waters turn to wine, and they have this super great abundance of not just something simple and plain, but something that is absolutely the best. Cool story. Great miracle. I mean, what do you really have to say? Yeah, do it again. Yeah, do it again, God. Do it again. How does that relate with us? You know, when we get down to the point of saying, so what does that have to do with me? Let's look back across some of the Old Testament as to where we see God calling people, as to where we see God calling people. And we look at Gideon, who's in a hole, and God pulled him. Daniel, who's in the lion's den. Joseph, who's in prison. And the list goes on and on. That God pulls from the pit of life and turns them into, not from the pedestal. God doesn't pull people down from a pedestal and put them into. God literally has the ability to turn the most ordinary, common, maybe even that, what we would call gray water,